Hey everybody, wanted to share some stuff with you, and so figured we create this recording. I think it's a useful one for various reasons in terms of just walking through this InnerLight platform that we've created, and so as a result, I want to be an example, right? Meaning that everybody don't know how to use this, and I want to share my personal map with you because I've been the one kind of going far enough into what it means to build this, and so I think there's some meaningful stuff to be able to share here. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And so if you take a look at this right here, you'll see this is the site itself, right? app.thesecretproject.com. And so InnerLight is also termed InnerLight a secret project, mainly because at one point, it was just Seeker. So if you've been here long enough, you know that it was just Seeker. But I think being able to widen widen the offerings and focus squarely on some certain things we've landed on here being InnerLight. And so I want to show you and I think it's going to be particularly useful here for several reasons. So this is my map. And if you were to log into InnerLight right now, your map wouldn't look anything like this. These are 52 or 53-ish of my own parts. And I say this because if I was to show you, right, I log out real quick and coming here with a different account, one of my other ones that I have kind of set aside to be a much newer version on purpose, right? Kind of to test certain things out. But all that to say, all of those parts go away. And so yours may look closer to this, and that's okay, right? You just started your journey. You may have found your very first part that you wanted to bring to the platform, and that's perfectly fine. But for the purposes of this here, in terms of just kind of showing you a little bit about myself and what this platform can do for you, I wanted to provide this contrast. So what you have are these like different galaxy clusters, or at the very least these nebulous clouds, these nebulas, right? So about galaxy clusters is a different thing. I'll go into that in a second. But these are different nebulas, and so in this sense, what we're seeing here are like these kind of mini galaxies based upon different types of emotions. And so here's, where, this kind of, this organization around heavy emotions or emotions that feel more open or protective of my system or still or more loving, right? Some that are numb, others that are curious, right? Anxious, calm or confident, right? So we have, these categories that kind of organize in this way. And you would unlock this kind of nebula clouds feature after you've reached like 30 plus parts, and that's cool. Like it's a process. You may not be here every single day, but to get something meaningful, we think about 30 can offer that. And for those who are not at 30, right, you can you'll be able to organize yours, just in these kind of buffers here. And this is the emotion space, and so like it won't be your default setting where you show up and that's what it looks like for you. But, when you have one or two, so on and so forth, then, this is kind of what you'll be able to see the categories split up for you. And that's perfectly fine. But what I wanted to show you today specifically, right, was this cluster feature. And to give you a sense, come out of emotion, go back to default. This is the clusters feature. This cluster space is particularly like important mainly because it is how all of these parts organize, right? So this kind of how your system self-organizes. And this is important for many reasons, but I want to show you this here. So these kind of pieces right here around like managing scarcity and resourcefulness, and even if they're like not, immediately connected through, say, these rings or these orbiting rings, those that are kind of close to it, follow-ups, how that's connected to business and resources, right, or cautious protector, these may not be as immediately tied, right, as fear of not having enough or around, right, the hate for spending money. And then I have this other side over here that is organized around striving for potential and avoiding complacency, right? And so this one, you're the one who wants more. You can see, suspicious alarm system. You could even look at it in terms of, right, the ones that may not be like immediately tied through orbit, right, the player who has eyes of possibility. And versus, right, confused that people settle. And so, like, dealing with, again, this notion of striving for potential and avoiding complacency, like, these are some of the parts that are immediately disappointed that people settle, that are immediately like a part of my system. And so I wanted to kind of talk about this one, navigating internal conflicts and expectations. And this one right here, I think, has at least 34 parts. That's what you're seeing, all these different planets kind of circling around this particular solar system around navigating internal conflicts. And I think it's like super interesting for so many reasons. But I wanted to point something out and just be honest with you. Like, my wife tells me all the time that I have like an anxious system. And there are times I really don't want to believe it. But I think when we think anxiety, sometimes we think scared. And if you know me, that's not the type of energy I carry. Like, fear is not it. It's more so like always being ready to be on the go, to respond, to be like ready to kind of pounce or jump or just be on edge, so to speak, all the time. Like, my problem isn't being afraid. Mine is always being ready. And that is a different type of anxiousness. Like, we know anger is another form of anxiousness that shows up in black men in a different way. It's hypervigilance that shows up in a real serious way, right? This kind of frustration or irritation kind of space, right? And so, like, I'm here to show you that, like, even as a man that may carry himself a certain way, like, when you can see that over half of my system, almost 80% of my system is bound up, not bound, it's tied together or organizes itself through navigating the environment around this kind of like anxious, irritable, like always on guard, always on alert kind of energy. Like, it says a whole lot, right, about what it means to even feel how safe I may feel, or how much I recognize like it's okay to even be in my own body or just be in this world in a lot of ways. But what I think is incredibly important here is what I can see here is that it's an honest reflection of how my system is self-organizing. Like, and to be able to see that, I think in a nutshell, like, provides a whole nother level of clarity. Because to be able to not just kind of see it and know it, you know what I'm saying, on one level, but to be able to witness it, see what's there, right? Like, within this particular cluster, right, you got, right, public facing protector, like, who I may show sometimes self-awareness as stall, like not getting certain things out and using the guise of like going deeper inside as a means of like not producing, right? Tired grinder, like all of this right here is about what an inner driver, like all of these are in some ways, right, the part that wants to be like, right, how I'm navigating these internal conflicts. And to see that we have this propensity for this, I think is like the first step. And so all I'm trying to say is that what I can gain from this at the very least is a grasp, like just a grasp on my system. And not only is it a grasp on it, but it's a visualization of it. And so I can see how I can then look at all of these different parts and then become intentional about weaving my life back together again, I think in a much more cohesive way that doesn't feel as disparate. And so being able to name a part, being able to put it in this space, being able to organize it and see how all of this functions, and then begin to do the next steps of not just reorganization, because this map is dynamic. Meaning, I'll say this: earlier this week, I was at 4 clusters. Right, and to have a cluster, you need at least 2 parts around a particular like topic, or even more so, not just the topic. Right? Let me stop lying. The organization comes around here. So I turn clusters off, go back to this basic piece. The clusters are formed right through these connections. And so if you look at it, these are my connections within my system that work together in a positive. They're allies, right? They on each other's side. They willing to work together, right? These are my parts that are protective of each other, protective of my system, right? These are the parts that are polarized, right, in conflict with one another. And these are the parts that are just aware of each other's presence. And so, like, this is how my system is woven together in this particular way. And from here, right, go back to default and turn the clusters back on. From there, we get to see this. And so this is a dynamic diary of sorts, because earlier this week I was at 4, which means something in my system has changed to create either more internal conflict or more towards these other spaces. And so what we're seeing here is the constant evolution. And we're going to be continuing to increase not so much what this means, but the ability for the InnerLight to, or the guide, so to speak, within InnerLight, we're going to increase the capacity of the guide to be curious about this, what it knows about the system, and offer different ways for people to continue to self-explore. And like I said, so man, regain the ability to put your life together. Regain the ability to understand and see how you're put together, how you're wired. And so this, for me, will continue to evolve. And, just because there's a lot of density doesn't necessarily mean that it's all bad, especially if we see, for instance, right, this is a confident one that's part of this one. This one's a little bit anxious. This one's energized. This one is calm. And so it's not just like an anxious system as a means of like, oh, I'm always on the fritz. But it says that a lot of my parts are invested, and a lot of me is invested in making sure that I'm dealing with and having a good relationship with myself. So navigating internal conflicts. It's not just anxiety, like because I'm always like over here. No, it's what it means. My parts are invested in navigating these things, so that when you have to make a choice, or when you have to deal with maneuvering in and out of situations and different versions of yourself, you can do so right with the level of cleanness or smoothness. And so the idea, at the very least, is not just the self-awareness, but a recognition of the organization, so that you can begin to engage in the real work of weaving this all together. And I keep saying the word weave, right? Because what I haven't necessarily said, right, and or just kind of said explicitly, is that when we see our lives just this within this kind of space that is like just sparsed out. Connection. There we go. So instead of saying your system is just like this kind of widely sparsed out space, the other opportunity that is bound within there is what it means to weave all of this together. And I think within so in certain realms this is called integration, but knowing that life is both compartmentalized and interdependent, integration is not suggesting that we're integrating back into one version of ourselves. The integration is really a weaving together of the many avenues, aspects, parts, flex, beams, all of that into a coherent way of being. And so in this sense, this is this weaving together of every aspect of one's life into a coherent stream is my definition of spirituality. But nevertheless, it is being able to take all of this beautiful information and then organizing it and then weaving it back into something coherent, into something that is a deep and resonant reflection of one's internal world recognized from the outside. So that's what I got to say today. And yeah, I'm excited for all of this. And I hope y'all have a fantastic rest of your day. Until next time.